This is the Year 4 training video looking at what greater depth looks like at the end of Year 4, linked to my exemplification of writing standards for Year 4. The higher ability children in your class aren't necessarily the children who do have the potential to achieve greater depth. They might have higher ability in relation to the rest of the children in your class. So this is why it's important to really think now whether those children have got the potential to achieve greater depth at the end of Year 6. The aim of the curriculum is to get as many children to mastery as possible, and mastery means to have mastered the statements in the curriculum. It doesn't mean greater depth, but there does have to be something there for those children who exhibit real flair, who are gifted in writing. And those children, I was going to say probably, but I'm going to say 99.9% of the time, absolutely love reading, and they are good at reading, and they're good at inferring, they're good at getting plot and character and setting from the reading and putting it into the writing. These children don't need a list of success criteria, they don't need waggles to support them. In fact, heavy scaffolding can actually hinder them because they really try to put everything in that the teacher wants them to put in, whereas actually left a little bit to their own devices, they show their own style and flair, put a bit of themselves into the writing. You read their writing and think, wow, that is amazing. But you can't just say, yes, they are greater depth because their writing's amazing and I just know the greater depth. You do have to link it to some statements. So we are going to begin by looking at the statements in the end of Year 6 assessment framework. It's only 2 years until your children reach Year 6, so it is a good idea to start working towards this now. So the first statement, to write effectively for a range of purposes and audiences, selecting the appropriate form and drawing independently on what they've read as models for their own writing. And this is about the children really knowing who they're writing for, knowing what they're writing and knowing what they can take from their menu of what they've learnt so far to put into that writing. So not just knowing the genre, but knowing what they can use and how they can use it effectively. Because that's the thing with higher ability children who have the potential to achieve greater depth. They're not just using writing as a formula. They know how to use everything in a way that produces this piece of writing that is going to engage the reader. And that's from everything they've learned so far. For you, up to the end of Year 4. It's not about going into grammar and punctuation for Year 5 and 6, although children who are potentially greater depth writers will take from higher up because they'll take it from the reading and they'll use it appropriately. Doesn't mean to say that you necessarily have to teach them it. You will support them with developing their writing, developing them as writers, rather than just giving them more grammar and punctuation to put into the writing. And the second statement is very much along the same lines. It's knowing what the writing requires from what they know so far and being consistent with either the formality or the informality of that piece of writing. The third point is really key as well, to exercise an assured and conscious control over levels of formality, particularly through manipulating grammar and vocabulary to achieve this. That's working on a piece of writing for a certain amount of time to make it the best possible piece of writing it can be. And I see stamina as not stamina to write 10 pages till the hand's nearly dropping off, but actually stamina to work on a piece of writing for a longer amount of time, to perfect it, to hone it, like real writers do. And then, of course, the last bullet point, using the range of punctuation taught at Key Stage 2 correctly and when necessary, using such punctuation precisely to enhance meaning and avoid ambiguity. So that's knowing why punctuation is used, not about thinking, well, I better put a fronted adverbial here with a comma because that's in the Year 4 curriculum. That is about writing and knowing when to put punctuation in to support the reader with accessing the writing and also with engaging with the writing. So that's working at greater depth at the end of Year 6 in the statutory framework. Let's have a look at a piece of writing from the Year 6 exemplification, which, as it so rightly says, exemplifies those statements. What I like about this piece of writing is that it shows that you don't have to write massively at length to be greater depth. It's about using everything well and precisely. And I love this as a task. This could be a task that you give your Year 4 children so that they can demonstrate how clever they are as writers. So you've got a short story. First of all, it's written in the third person, and then the same story written in the first person. And so there's actually quite a lot of different things there that will show the talent that those children have, not only changing from third to first person, but might be about changing the tense. It's about actually writing the exact same plot, but with a different perspective on it. So let's read it from the third person first. Opening the fridge. Slowly, Ewan peeped through the crack in his door. All was black. He took a step out. He could hear distant snoring as he crept across the landing. As his heart raced, he stared into the darkness. He could hear the fridge urging him on, willing him to move. Now the stairs, the tricky bit. Suddenly, a thud. He raced down the creaking stairs, even the seventh one that makes an ear-splitting creak. He could see the white rectangle straight ahead of him. Then he opened it. He took a quick glance and saw the chocolate digestives. He could feel pairs of eyes watching him in the darkness. Who was it? Had he been seen? His eyes darted around the room. His heart in his mouth. He grabbed the biscuits and ran for it. "Ewan?" echoed a voice. And then, in the first person, I lay under the covers staring at the ceiling, my stomach empty. Slowly I got out of bed and crept towards my door. The handle shimmered in the darkness, urging me to turn it. My hand quivered as the brass handle turned and made a click. I jumped. Shadows crept across the landing while I nibbled at my nail. My parents' room's door creaked and I bolted down the stairs, including the seventh one that makes an ear-splitting thud when you step on it. I stared at the human-eating fridge and my legs turned to jelly as I tiptoed towards it. I reached out and... That's really clever. It's actually quite simple writing, but very, very effective. And the way he repeats different elements, such as the seventh step that makes an ear-splitting thud. You know, I like his editing as well. He changes noise to creak. He knows that he should have written crept instead of creaked. But, you know, it builds up the suspense, and all it is this boy stealing some food out of the fridge. And that's what I mean about children being able to show the style. Give them slightly different slants on the task. In Year 4, for a lot of children, you'll still be heavily scaffolding their writing and supporting them with the formula that is writing. But these children don't need that. They need something like this that gives them something different to work on, to excite them, to show what they can really do. So with Year 4 in mind, I've put together this document here, which you'll see that there is a link to it underneath this video. It's Year 1 to Year 6 and what greater depth looks like across the primary age range. What I've done is I've typed up the curriculum, but then I've put in red what I think greater depth looks like within the Year 4 curriculum. As I said before, it's not about going to the next year group, it's about broadening within. So obviously, as far as punctuation goes, it's about using it consistently. And there should be absolutely no error in the Key Stage 1 punctuation, or eventually in commas, using commas after fronted adverbials. And commas, as we spoke about in the last video, they are tricky to use. But with Year 4 potential greater depth children, they will completely understand them. We've also got using inverted commas to punctuate direct speech, and that is a year 3-4 teaching element. But I think for greater depth children, once they've learned how to punctuate it, think about that statement we saw at the end of year 6 about using dialogue sparingly, so that it effectively adds detail to the writing, using it to move action on and to show character. Also using a range of different sentence forms, and by that I mean statements, commands, questions and exclamations, because that can sometimes fall off the end in year 4, but using them appropriately for the genre, knowing when to use them and how to use them. For expanded noun phrases, that was mentioned in year 2 as we saw in the last video, but also in year 4, using that or with. But it's about them using precise adjectives, so using adjectives well, using them to add detail for the reader that they didn't know, using them sparingly, because they've got other things they can use by the end of year 4 to add detail. So we don't want too many adjectives, we want them used well. And of course, the coordinating conjunctions and subordinated conjunctions as well, use a range of those, sometimes maybe a couple in a sentence, so the writing really flows. Frontal adverbials, that's a year 4 criteria. Often you'll get children in year 4 using them at the beginning of every sentence, but those who are aiming for greater depth, it's about using them again sparingly, precisely, to add detail to the reader. Every so often, not the beginning of every sentence, and about naturally using a range of verb forms accurately, again for that flow and cohesion. To use paragraphs effectively, so you don't want any weakness in paragraphs for greater depth writing, and also to use precise pronouns or nouns, again for cohesion. The writing should flow, so not repeating the name of the character, for instance, but thinking of some really good, clever synonyms. And then this last bit here illustrates the point I made about giving them some freedom to write and not giving them too much scaffolding, so that they really can show what they can do. And then this is all illustrated on my assessment grid at the bottom here, so that you can keep track of what children are doing in the writing. So I've put the key points here. Write effectively for a range of purposes and audiences, selecting language that shows good awareness of the reader. So that's directly from the year 6 greater depth statements. Consistently use dialogue sparingly, so it adds detail to the writing. Consistently use a range of conjunctions to support cohesion. Use a range of precise vocabulary, nouns, verbs and adjectives. And also consistently use a full range of punctuation taught at Key Stage 1 and in year 3-4. And I would say, because the writing has to be legible by the end of year 6, to consistently produce legible joined handwriting. It has to be joined at the end of year 6, so I think certainly greater depth writers, if not other children in your class, should be producing joined handwriting by the end of year 4 ideally.